Hold on. I got to roll a
Hold
die.
on. Gotta roll a die.
Right, 14. We can have the show tonight.
Oh,
I succeeded on my DC check.
You succeeded on your chaos check?
I did. Hey, Kurt, you win. Welcome to Lawfully Chaotic, Season 2, Episode 26. Tonight, we are going to be talking about dice systems in games, mainly, I guess, role-playing games, different dice mechanics and base systems and how they work, and are some better than others, and I'm sure we'll have a lot of opinions. Thank you for joining us. There's always lots. Thank you for joining us in chat, for those of you who are here or will be joining us, or thank you for watching us
later on podcast, or
Absolutely.
later on video on demand on the YouTubes or the Twitches or wherever it is you consume our useless information.
Yep, or on X. As with me always
on
is
X.
my as with me always is
formerly
my
known as the Twitter.
Yeah, the social platform formerly known as. Jason Baldrick of TTRPG Academy. Jason, thank you once again for
absolutely
joining me on this endeavor. What announcements do we have? I got nothing. Same as last week. Jace, what about you?
Yeah, lots of fun things going on with the D&D club. I think that's going to be something that will be interesting when that's finished up, which after this show, I'll be sending the rollover package to one of the tables to start one of my tables enrolling into the new RPG club website. Awesome. So we get some tests out of that. I'm going to be working on 4 new tables. 2 tables are wrapping up after 2 years of playing. So it's, time to get those tables reset. And I'm also starting.
Those going to be D&D games, or are you delving into something else?
I don't know yet. I'm pretty sure one of them will be D&D. Will probably be my Sunday game because it's a very popular time slot for D&D. Cool. My Monday game is either going to be Candela Obscura or possibly Walking Dead, if I can get the rules sorted out and figure out how that works.
Cool.
Because Daggerheart's still way off, so I'm probably not going to get a Daggerheart table for some time. Other than that, yeah, it's just getting the fall schedule for me planned to. Oh, and I am going to be starting a homebrew newbie game to teach people how to play. D&D.
Awesome!
So that'll be a short Saturday campaign that will run in the fall. It'll probably dice mechanics.
Dice mechanics.
So when you're in traffic and you look at your D12 and you know your D12's broken, do you turn up your radio and tell yourself, there it is, it's all fixed?
If your dice aren't rolling well, just don't look at them.
Awesome. Bostonian accent. I'm not very
Boston
good at
accent. Yeah, my dice, my friggin' dice are broken there. I keep rolling a friggin' 2.
Well, all you got to do is just roll up your window and it'll fix your dice.
Yeah, right.
As long as you can't hear your broken dice, it'll be fine.
Yeah, and after you roll down your window, you toss them out on a mass turnpike there. Gold, Jerry, gold. All right, let's dive into it. Dice mechanics, dice systems.
Yeah, I think this came about because over some of the previous shows we've done together, we've talked about homebrew creation. We've talked about creating campaigns. We've talked about the idea of building games, building worlds, and building things. And what I found really interesting is the 2 new release systems, both Candela, which is currently in pre-release with limited access, and then Gen Con previewed Daggerheart. And then it also inspired me to look and do some research in general about all these other systems, and the idea of all these other systems. And so, in our Discord, if you ever get a chance, in our Discord, I created a section of a family of alternate systems, which is the name of systems, right? There's the Apocalypse system, the Cortex, there's these.
Okay, so tell us.
Systems.
Okay, so basically we've got a D6 system which can take the form.
That's what I'm getting. Because
go ahead.
Even though you have a name of a system like the Apocalypse system, the Cortex system, the the world system. Like they have these names for them.
Yeah.
They don't necessarily tell you specifically that they're a D6 or
They
a
do
D12,
not.
but they kind of say they are without actually explicitly saying they are. And I thought it was an interesting way to approach the challenges of building a game, in the sense that there's really only two games that use a D20 system, and that's Pathfinder and D&D.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, there's not really an alternate D20 game out there, because a lot of people don't want to tackle D20 systems, because then you got to tackle the two big players in the room, the one predominant player, D&D and WotC, and then obviously Pathfinder is a D20 system.
Okay, so that's our
our
basic D20. We're obviously not going to go into every single game that uses every different dice mechanic. So that's our D20. All right.
There's another one that's actually more prolific than D20 is the D6 system.
Right.
And
dice pools.
And well, more importantly, when I was researching the D6 system, where are all my tabs going? Why have they all gone away? There they are. So the D6 system came around in 1996. It's published by West End Games. It's a universal system, and it's a D6 system with customizable role-playing game.
Okay, now hold on a second. Is this a specific, because Shadowrun used D6 way before 96.
Right.
Is this a specific, like, we have created a system?
So essentially, Shadowrun has a system that uses D6 dice.
That's actually a good question. Does a D6 that uses icons still count as D6?
If the icons follow the idea of the algorithm of probability that equal to a D6 probability, I would consider it a D6. Now,
sure.
If a dice has a single unique icon on each face, I would say yes. But if a D6 has 3 of the same icon and then 3 of the same icon, that doesn't feel like a traditional D6, because the algorithm is deprecated to the icon results, as opposed to an equal chance of chaos of one unique number factor that kind of is rolled out.
So a game that comes to mind, it's not a role-playing game, it's a board game, is Cthulhu Death May Die by Simon Games. That uses D6 dice pools, but they are custom D6, and depending on whether you're using the black or the green, they have, I think, 1 or 2 blank faces, 3 of another face and 1 of another face. So I think I agree with you. If the probability changes, it's more of a custom system.
Or
and
custom die.
Custom die, and
Yeah.
I wouldn't lump it in the same.
Right. So there is a gaming system called the D6 system.
Okay.
So it's the only one I could find that was unique enough that intrigued me, because the Illuminati world system of Candela Obscura uses D6 dice, but that doesn't make them a D6 system.
So what is the D6 system? What is the base of that?
Yeah. So
in a nutshell.
Basically, the D6 system fundamentally is built around the D6 dice, and it's an actual rule set called the D6 system, and it's GURPSian. It's built in such a way that you could use it for any game you want to play.
Right, but I mean, from a mechanic standpoint, are you rolling 1 die? Are you rolling 2? Is it a pool system?
Depends on how you choose to use it.
Okay.
So if you want to use it as a pool system, if you want to use it as standard 4d6 for attributes, if you want to use it for action resolution, if you want to use it for variant resolution systems, it's I think the intent of it was to create a very simple rule system of D6 dice that can be used with any genre, theme, or application.
Okay.
And I think it's the truest system-related dice. Like Daggerheart has a system they're going to use, and I think it's the Hope Fear system.
Yes,
what they're going to be going with.
Yeah, we'll go into that in a minute.
The Hope Fear system uses D12 as the demonstrative result dice. but that doesn't necessarily make it a D12 system. It just happens to be the Hope Fear system that uses a D12 dice mechanic.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes that's where people building games get a little lost in the tall grass. You know, they like.
I would agree, and again, I think Candela is a good example of that, where, you know, you and I have done a lot of talk on this, you know, like a reimagining of GURPS or a universal system that could work for anything, that is crunchy and yet still keeps the door wide open for narrative. And we've discussed different dice systems too, and I think that is an important. You make an interesting point. Does it have to be Are you creating a game for the sake of creating a game, and are you developing a dice system for that game that works for that game in a vacuum?
Right.
Or are you creating, like, I'm creating a game, but I'm also creating a system that is agnostic enough to be used in any theme and expandable, and am I creating a true dice mechanic system?
Right. Like, for example, I can type in a search for the D10 system,
Mm-hmm.
and it automatically takes me to what's called the storyteller system. And the storyteller system was invented by one of the Shadowrun creators back in Gen Con 90 is when they began to mess with the idea of using D10 instead of D6 for a storytelling system. Once again...
Now, you're not talking about percentile. You're talking about D10.
The actual D10s.
Okay.
But even to the point of Zombicide, right? Zombicide is using
dice
a
pool.
rule. Well, they're using dice pool system with a D6 mechanic.
Yeah.
So you could use a dice pool system with a D10 mechanic, a
Of
D12
course.
mechanic, depending on how you build it out. So I think what happens is when a lot of people get out there in the world and they go, well, D&D uses a D20 system. I said, yes, D&D uses a D20 mechanic that is also a D20 system.
Right. Well, and I would actually agree with you and your vernacular, whereas normally I would not have, where, yeah, it uses a D20 mechanic, but it's a DC system.
Well, but it's fundamentally all of its actions and resolutions are based on a D20 roll.
Right,
so
but they're also based on meeting a difficulty level.
Well, not necessarily as a base of... So from what I can tell from the difference between a designed system using a dice type and then a system that like calls itself a system related to its dice type, it seems that the core philosophy is that its action and resolution require a dice mechanic in the common vernacular. The only uncommon vernacular of the mechanic of the dice in D&D is damage.
Right.
Everything else is an action or resolution against a D20 roll, whether it's to hit an armor class, to check a difficulty, to make a saving throw. So they run a true D20 system because the majority of the action the action and purpose of their die is resolved against a single dice.
Yes.
Which is the D20.
Right.
The other dice
the outcome is pass
is ancillary. Well, no, the outcome is ancillary to another dice or to a limited narrative result.
Right. That limited narrative result being you either pass or you fail.
Correct. Or you take damage, or
but in general, you're trying to do something with a D20, and yes. Okay, so probably I would say, and maybe it's not the case anymore, but I would say that the D100 system was probably the next most well-known, or not even popular, but maybe next most well-known.
I don't know. My conjecture would be the D6 pool die. I would say the D6 pool dice system.
Oh, I thought we already. So we've got D20.
Right.
We've got a D6
we're going backwards.
System. Yeah, we've got a D6 system, and we've got D6 pool, and probably percentile, And that brings me back to
and I wouldn't even call it a D100 system. I'd actually call it a percentile
percentile.
system. Yeah, I think it would make more sense.
Yeah. And
so if you're running...
That calls back to mine Middle-earth role-playing.
Right.
Which is also very much based on you either pass or fail. But I think by stretching the boundaries of your range from 0 to 20 to 0 to 100 gave a little bit more room to play with in terms of that dice system supporting a deeper skill tree than D&D. Because I think, D&D, I mean, we've talked about this. I think, well, I don't want to make that statement because it's too broad, but I myself am, I don't want to say losing interest or don't like D&D anymore. That's not the case. But the D20 system does become kind of rote. Like you said.
I would say the best way to describe it is it can quickly become stale.
Stale, yes, thank you. Yeah.
It can become kind of stale.
I mean, even, after a while, you've got from level 1 to 20. First of all, I never like level caps in a game. Although the way D&D works, 20th level is you don't often attain that, and by that time you're ready to start something else. So maybe that's not so bad, and that's not the conversation, so we'll leave that alone. But as your character progresses, that range of outcomes stays the same. You're still within the 1 through 20 range. And I think the reason that I like playing mid-level characters much more than high-level characters is because it's not that stale. And once you get to a certain level, I mean, your chances of failing go down drastically because your scale has remained like this, and your abilities have ramped up. So at least with a percentile system, there's more room to play with a deeper skill tree and, focusing on expertise in a few things, and a taller range, if you will, to be able to support leveling up. I still like the percentile system in terms of a simple pass-fail system, because again, for that reason, I think it allows for much more transformative play than the D20 system of D&D does. That's my opinion.
Well, I think when I think of percentile, I think of a very creative table of information that will let you scale the pass-fail without having to be overly narrative.
Yes.
So if you have a D100 chart built and you're playing like Middle-earth style game and you're trying to run it entirely off of a percentile system, which is, the D10 system for all intents and purposes, the detail of your chart is taking over your narrative process, and therefore you're using the combination of random chart results within the percentile approach to hopefully codify together something that's going to something that's going to allow you to create something that's not stale, because it's just as random to the GM as it is to the player.
Yeah.
And I think that prevents a certain level of staleness. Like, I think 5e, because they've lost some of that narrative comfort level and they've become too hung up on a stringent D20 DC system, that to a point after level 10, it's going to start feeling very stale and repetitive, because you're kind of doing the same thing over and over again, because there's not a lot of narrative opportunity, dare I say, in the action economy of a restrictive game.
Right? Yeah, I agree. It's like, I think, opinions on narrative versus crunchy aside, I think you've got to pick one path or find a creative way to combine them. I don't think D&D does that. It claims, in the new D&D world of the past 4 years or so, with its kind of reawakening, it claims to be moving towards more narrative and fostering narrative play. But other than adding just color commentary, you can't really do that.
Brennan Lee Mulligan and Matt Mercer are the exception to the
Sure.
idea of that, because they've recognized right up front the stringent requirement of their system. And then, they've decided to make it narrative by scaling the pass and fail. So they've made it narrative because they don't consider pass and fail an absolute outcome.
Right. But again, you're talking about two top
exactly. So,
DMs.
And I think for some of us that have always been playing that way, we haven't been really well received in the community over the last 25 years pre-5th edition.
Yeah.
Because people teach themselves the rote mechanic nature of the game, and that's what they're expecting when they want to play.
Yeah.
They're expecting to play the way that they learned or consumed the game.
So 3 Miles, your question, how would you level up the D20 system? My answer, honestly, is scrap it and use something else.
No, I think it's a valid question. What I would do, what I have done is I've kind of gotten, one thing I've done is I got rid of leveling up and just created a flat milestone system to kind of augment the fact we're not using levels. The other thing I've done is I'm home brewing, or allowing the players to home brew spells, how they perform spells, how they interpret spells within the arcane, divine, natural idea of magic. The other thing too is I've been trying to develop alternate skill pools that they can use for alternate reasons, whether it's tinkering a device to make your other device better, or making unique alchemies or unique crafts or unique scrolls or things to kind of create a mini action economy within a very kind of absolute D20 system, if that makes sense.
It does. However, to level up, in answer to the question, to level up the D20 system, this is just my opinion. I'm not saying you're wrong.
But you're wrong, but that's fine. Move on.
I agree with a lot of what you said.
That's exactly what I've been doing for the past 10 years with the game.
Yeah, but my point is,
I don't want to be absolute. I want to say, even if you fail, if you don't fail egregiously, you can still learn something or have a limited success.
Sure, but what you have to recognize is that's all homebrew. Changing around the crit rules is all homebrew. Changing around the skill trees is all homebrew.
Right.
That is one
of the system is built very rigid. You're right.
Yeah, and I will say that I think that is the beauty of D&D is, as we all know, it is very the opportunity to homebrew it is there, and it's easy to do. However, to really make the system better, you've got to homebrew the shit out of it, in my opinion.
Yeah, and luckily it's very forgiving for that, because there are some systems that aren't forgiving for homebrew.
Absolutely, right. And I would say, so as I'm knocking the game, I'm also giving it props for being able to support
This is WotC at its core.
Whoops.
In the idea of its development, right? Everybody's pissed that a 1 is always a fail and a 20 is always a success.
Yeah.
In the confines of a system, that should make sense. An absolute failure or an extreme success where the creativity of those two things can be played out in the game, I think is really based on how the GM interprets it. But when you play it in an environment like Baldur's Gate, it's just an absolute.
Yeah.
It's an absolute failure and an absolute success.
Right.
And it has no flavor. It has no anima. It has no real kind of emotion to it, because the game mechanic, like Baldur's Gate 3, it's just a mathematical outcome to tell you succeeded. It's not going to give you a sliding scale. That's going to give you kind of like the ability to be slightly creative, a little more creative,
well,
very
and
creative,
it
very
quashes
revealing.
And it quashes the ability for narrative play. I mean, sure, you can describe a critical fail or success in these amazing descriptive terms, but it doesn't change the outcome.
Right. In the absolute rigidity of how they built the D20 system.
Right.
I would wholeheartedly agree with that.
Yeah.
Now, what's interesting about what Candela Obscura finally brings to the table that I don't think Cthulhu did very well and other horror games did very well. A lot of games previously would create difficulties of success and difficulties of or degrees of success, degrees of failure.
Right.
So it afforded some narrative styling. But what I think Candela does better at the idea of using the D6 within their system of the Illuminati world, their D6 is a minimal approach to the fact that they've built what you would call drive, action, and resistances. And because, once again, it's always interesting how in game development, the trifecta works best. Whenever a game is developed that is dealing in rules of 2, 4, 5, or higher, they don't do very well.
Mm-hmm.
But games that are developed around what's called the trifecta, the rule of 3, always seems to do really good. It always seems to make sense because there's always one of the options that's going to unbalance or balance the other two.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what creates creativity. So in the Candela Obscura, they do a great job of following the trifecta rule, which is you have drive, you have actions, and you have resistances. That is the action economy of the player. They will influence the D6 that you roll based on that trifecta. To your point about a stale D20 system, if all I'm worried about in a system is action and resolution, which is 2 things versus 3 things. So if my system is built around action and resolution, is it ever really going to get much more fun later on? Because there's no third thing to weigh out action and resolution, right? So in D20 world, their armor class is a 15. You roll a 15 or higher. The resolution is you hit them.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter what weapon you hit them with until you roll a damage die, right? Because the damage die maybe has a little creativity in the weapon itself.
Right.
But in narrative play, you say, I'm going to use a drive and I'm going to run up to the guy and punch them in the face. And then, of course, I'm going to look at the person and go, okay, go ahead and roll a strike. And so because they spent the drive point, they have 2 points in that strike action. They're going to roll 3 6-sided die. 1, 2, 3 is a failure. 4, 5 is a mixed success. And a 6 is a success. Now, did you notice what I just did there?
Mm-hmm.
The trifecta again.
Yes.
There's 3 points of outcome.
Well, that is,
there's
it is the sweet spot. It's the sweet spot in visual design also.
There's 3 things in the action economy, right? The trifecta of 3 always works the best when you start developing these things.
So they're introducing 2 important aspects to previous systems. Not only are they introducing degrees of success and failure through the use of that trifecta, but they're also introducing dice pools, which seem to be gaining.
Correct.
Which
they're
seem to
gaining
be
popularity again, and I'm glad for it. I'm really glad for it.
It took me a little while to get in with the idea of dice pools, but I agree. I think it's a good way to go. It's a good way to manage high power versus low power characters or abilities or skills or whatever, and still have a chance for low power to succeed and for high power to fail.
Yeah.
Right?
I like that.
And then when you put on top of it the level of degrees of success, I mean, that opens you up. That opens you. Yes. If somebody comes out with a game that allows me to roll 3,000 dice, I'm buying
in,
it.
baby.
I'm in.
I'm in.
The only game I will ever play again. Gary has seen just a small smidgen of my dice collection.
Well, and that's why I feel like sometimes the closer we get to the trifecta design, the closer we're getting to a GURPS-like solution. Like
I agree.
We're getting to that universal solution of a gaming system that's going to make sense, where you've developed a solid action economy that is the core of your system.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're also developing the trifecta of how the dice interact with that core of the system. And the two, when they collide or collude, gives you all the narrative kind of that's like the worst dice to use for a system.
The D4 system consists
It's
of
got
just
to be the worst.
no. All that is a handful of the sharp D4s, and you just throw them at each other.
Yeah, but mathematically,
and you play until somebody loses an eye. That's it.
Mathematically, it's a quarterly system.
Yeah, that's
Which the reason why D6 I think is so popular.
Exactly. See,
and the reason why I think it's such a popular system with D6 dice, even more so than D20, is that D6 dice allow you to not be burdened with huge algorithms of outcome. But the way you can control D6 dice within a good action economy or a good built core system, it'll offer an equal amount of chaos, regardless of the high level of its utilization.
Now that's interesting, because here's where I'm going to say that even with dice pools, I still personally do not care for D6 based systems. I still feel that even within dice pools, there is still not a broad enough range. I agree that it should be capped maybe at if you're doing dice pools, it should be capped at maybe a D10. I think an 8 or a 10 is probably the sweet spot.
And to that point, I think the difficulty in designing games around that idea, and maybe that's why D6s get so popular, is the variation of your results becomes either demonstrative or mitigated by the way you want to interpret the rule of their use, right? So, Daggerheart's a D12 mechanic using the Hope Fear system.
Okay, so let me go into that. I'm glad you brought that up.
Okay, transition over to that, and you can talk about Daggerheart, because I know it's been on your mind.
Okay. Yeah, it has. Because I admit I just delved into the wiki today, and I gotta admit, this system sounds really freaking appealing.
It sounds fun and exciting.
It sounds I am really excited for it, and I'm not just blowing smoke up Critical Role's ass. I really think it's awesome. So, and this is well, yeah, that too. I mean, D6s are prolific. You can grab them out of any fucking Monopoly game. Right? That's a good point, Gary. So Daggerheart uses, as you said, 2 D12s, right? 2 D12s of different colors. One called Hope and one called Fear. Some of the naming so far is a little clunky, I'll admit, but again, we're not talking about that. So
yeah, but I think to keep in mind that I think the naming convention was designed to support narrative play, and I think that's why it feels a little clunky right now.
I'm getting down into the weeds of semantics and copywriting, and maybe more descriptive words. But again, it's neither here nor there, and it doesn't detract from what they have planned, in my opinion. So 2 D12s of different colors. One is called Hope and one is called Fear. Okay, the higher roll of which determines which attribute the total roll affects. For example, if the total required to succeed is a 12, rolling less than that on both dice is combined is a failure. Rolling that total or above is a success. If the higher number is on the Hope die, it's a success with Hope. If the higher number is on the Fear die, it's a success with Fear. Advantage.
So I'm going to stop you really quick right there. You have an attribute number and 2 differentiation dice. What do you got?
3. Yeah.
Got the rule of 3.
Yeah.
It works.
It does. You are 100% on target. Advantage, if you have it, is given by rolling an additional D6. Okay, so that doesn't affect the Hope or Fear, but that affects your ability to succeed, which I think is fantastic. Yep. Rolling double on the 12s results in a critical success, which again, it's not like, oh, you rolled a double 12. It's any doubles. Could be fucking double 1s. Who cares?
Right.
So that too opens up an interesting narrative aspect of how to explain that from from an accomplishment point of view. So succeeding with Hope gives the player a spendable hope resource and can give positive narrative benefits while retaining initiative with the player characters. Whereas if you succeeded, but with fear, triggers some narrative consequence and in combat returns the initiative to the enemy. Also, fucking mind-blowing. Like using that outcome in battle to determine who maintains the initiative, that plays perfectly into, the fear in combat, or you're
More
winning.
importantly, it plays into the
morale.
most. It really plays importantly into narrative play, because
Absolutely.
the narrative play now has the ability for the opposition you're up against to have the initiative again and again and again and again.
Yeah.
Because they're more powerful than you, and because they're more lucky than you.
Yeah.
In the dice result. So it's not that rule of 2 that says you have a higher initiative, you go first. I have a lower, I go after you. Rule of 2, right?
Yeah.
Versus,
it's basically like morale in combat.
Yeah.
Right. The better you're doing, the more morale you have, the more cheering you have, the better you're going to do. So here is hit point, stress, and death mechanics. This is very interesting.
Now you just said it again. It's hit points, death, stress mechanics.
And stress.
Rule of 3.
Yeah.
The trifecta. Rule of 3.
So characters start with 6 hit points. Damage is determined by rolling a d6 through a d20. Again, to your point,
you have ancillary
which I think
dice
is,
you can still.
I think is great.
The fact that if you're be a damage die.
Absolutely.
That's awesome.
But that makes sense too. Somebody's finally woken up. I don't know who. I don't know whose brainchild initially Daggerheart was, whether it was Matt Mercer's or who's ever, but somebody was paying attention. I mean, you attack somebody with a fucking chopstick versus a great sword, they're going to do vastly different damage. Okay.
Right.
The player's armor score is subtracted from this roll.
You mean armor soak? Something we've been using in the RPG.
Like armor actually should do.
Something we've been using in the digital gaming space successfully, which translates very well into the role-playing game.
Yeah.
Is that if I am a chainmail wearing fighter, right? And my chainmail has value, it should soak the value of the damage until my value drops to 0.
Yeah.
Because armor doesn't stay perfect forever. Not even magical armor should technically stay pristine. And now you have conditional armor that will drop and then give you game mechanics of, well, my armor's shit. I better go shopping, or I better go get it repaired. Oh, I get it repaired at a blacksmith whose daughter's been kidnapped. Holy shit, I got a little side quest I can go on while he's repairing my armor. And in the hope fear system, I have more lead points now. I have more reasons to narrate. I have more reasons to kind of interact with what's going on around me, as opposed to the forced system of a dual approach.
Yeah.
Yes or no.
The second half of that sentence. Half of that sentence. But the armor is damaged.
Yeah.
Armor can be repaired during a short rest. I like your idea even better, where you can't just, if you have a kit to repair it and the skills, you can, but if not, you're fucked.
You gotta go find someone who can
find some new armor.
Yeah.
That's another thing. It's like, in D&D, and I don't mean to knock D&D, but that's another thing. It's like, I finally got my suit of plate mail. I'll have this until I die.
Right.
whether I'm crushed by a falling castle or engulfed in dragon fire,
Or, if a dragon swallows me whole and I'm being consumed in the stomach acid of a magical creature, there's no corrosion, there's no erosion, there's no damage.
Well, that's another inherent problem with armor class. If I'm swallowed by a purple worm, okay, I still have to roll to hit. I mean, all I got to do is go like this with my sword, and I'm gonna hit. You know what I mean?
Well, once again, the one thing that the D20 D&D system doesn't do well is it doesn't explain the use of its mechanics in an action economy way. So, for example, the to hit idea is a combination of your environment, your skill, and the weapon that you're using.
Yes.
The trifecta.
Yeah.
Right. But unfortunately, they don't use the action economy that way. So if you're a linear style of play, you're just seeing an opportunity to say, well, I'm grappled inside the stomach and I'm considered restrained. So I'm actually trying to hit with disadvantage.
Yeah.
But in my mind, I'm seeing a guy like this trying to stab with something into the interior space of something that has me restrained.
Right.
But yet there's no action economy to help me kind of like consume it in a way that's narrative as a player.
It's
I'm
very hard to
simply
deal with.
know that I'm going to roll 2d20. I take the lower of the two rolls, add my modifiers, and that determines whether or not I have a successful hit.
Right, but the fact that you're inside of what you were trying to hit should allow you to,
be a little bit more creative, a little bit more narrative, a little bit more. Should the armor class of the inside of a creature be the same as the outside?
But see, the whole armor class idea in the way that it's used, to your point,
it's not used in the sense of actual
Daggerheart
armor.
solves it.
Yeah,
it solves it.
It's just a number that takes into consideration the environment, your weapon, and the condition that you're in.
Yeah,
and therefore it's a fixed number that has variations you can use it for.
It's like
to determine your success or fail.
Easiest way to describe it is like shields on a starship. Right. You don't miss because the shields are up. You have to get through the shields, then you start doing damage.
Right.
So the shields,
and that's what I like about what they've done with Daggerheart, with both the Hope Fear system.
Mm-hmm.
The Hope Fear system uses a D12 mechanic to support the system. Other dice are used for the ancillary effects of the system being used,
which I love, by the way.
Yeah.
I think that's probably also one reason that I don't like the D6 dice pools, is because I do like the variation of the dice. I think it just if nothing else, just from an interest standpoint. So that I like somewhat crunchy mechanic systems.
Yeah.
Okay. To the point that they become, to the point that they hinder play. Okay. If they hinder play or slow down play, it's too crunchy. All right.
Right.
But I
fair.
love the random factor of a good system. And I think, like we've talked about, that is as important as good narrative play. I think if you can combine the two, which it looks like this hits the fucking bullseye on.
Yeah.
You can combine the two.
Well,
you've got a perfect system potentially.
I think another interesting thing is another way they use the trifecta. Choose a class, choose a foundation, choose a heritage.
Yeah.
Right? There's your trifecta.
Right. Let me read this last bit of mechanics. So remember, we're talking about death mechanics, okay?
True. Yeah.
So back to damage. If the total is below a preset threshold, the player takes a stress point instead of damage, which again is awesome. Okay, it's not just you take damage or you don't, right? Maybe you're not cut, but he came close to chopping your head off, and it's like, holy fuck, right?
Right.
If it exceeds this threshold, depending on by how much, the player loses 1, 2, or 3 hit points. This is interesting. If a player loses all their hit points, they can choose to either perma-die, but achieve a critical success, so basically go out with a bang.
The hero's death.
Right. Permanently lose a hope point, or roll both hope and fear dice to potentially return without dying. Completely narrative result right there.
Yeah.
Right. There is a single-use resurrection spell available per game. That's kind of weird, but I'm sure they've worked it in well. So.
Well, I mean, once again, technically they're still in playtest.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh, they're deep in playtest. Yeah.
I think
this is all speculative. This is all off the Critical Role wiki. So
But I think the relationship between systems and their dice is what's at play here, right?
Yeah.
You've got within a system, you have action economy, your character, and then the rules that guide the character and the action economy via the system. The system then uses dice to determine outcomes and resolution of the game, essentially. To me, that feels like that's what a game is. Like, it feels like whether you're playing Shadowrun, Battletech, Star Trek, Indiana Jones, GURPS, whatever game you're playing, they all follow a rule. They all follow a developmental rule to a certain degree. The Candela and Daggerheart purposely go outside those rules by being more on the narrative side than they are on the mechanical side. So by offering more action economy and creating very ambiguous and interpretive rules, and then using a simplified dice algorithm to help support that, narrative becomes the mandate. Like, narrative just becomes more fun, more interesting, easier to do.
Let me ask you this, though. Based on, and you know better than I when it comes to Candela, because you've been running the games.
Right.
And we have very limited information so far on Daggerheart. Is it fair to say, though, that if we have D&D over here, which is very weighted towards mechanics and very difficult to do narrative play, okay?
Right.
Candela is the opposite. Very heavy on narrative.
Opposite. Very much polar opposite.
Right. So
yeah,
very heavy,
opposite. Yeah.
very heavy on narrative and a very streamlined and very simple mechanic system. What I see going on with Daggerheart is a perfect balance between the two.
They're right in the middle. I would agree with you. They're right in the middle. And the reason why I can say this confidently is running 11 games a week. I get a lot of data. I get a lot of analytics, and I get a lot of feedback from everybody. My Monday game is playing Obscura. My Thursday game is playing Obscura. And then all my other games are playing variations of homebrew D&D with a lot of leaning towards narrative play style that people can play at the table. When I play Candela Obscura, I'm so focused because I don't have to roll dice. In Candela Obscura, I don't roll a single dice. The action economy in Candela Obscura and the narrative style puts all the ownership back in the player. So I'm responding to their degrees of success and degrees of failure. It's either extreme, somewhere in the middle, or, extremely successful, extremely failed, and then a sliding scale of a mixed success, right? So based on the tension and the narration of the game, I don't have to roll dice anymore. I get to focus on the pure creativity of the narrative, which I love.
Do you like that?
Oh, I love it more than D&D right now.
No. Do you like the fact that you don't have to roll dice as a game?
Oh, I love the fact I don't have to roll dice.
See, there's where we differ a little bit. I still because let's face it, and this is not, I don't want to get off into a major tangent. Okay, but
sometimes our major tangents turn into future topics.
Yeah, no, I know, but I don't know. I see a game master as playing the game also, or a DM as playing the game also, and enjoying the game also. Sure, you are there to facilitate the story and facilitate the player's enjoyment, okay? Especially as a paid DM or GM, okay? That's obvious. That changes it a little.
At some point, I think we have to do a show about that. We need to have a true show about what's the difference between hobby and profession. And
okay, so there you go, new topic.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good
topic.
But
I don't know. I see even though I am the DM, I gotta start getting used to using GM again.
Well, yeah, even though you're playing multiple systems,
GM even though I am the GM, I'm still playing the game. And I don't know. My point is, I like to roll dice. That's just me.
So a feedback to that, I think.
Well, that might be, yeah. Well, so okay, so there's our topic. All right.
Yeah, I think that's a good topic for next time, and we'll promote the hell out of it because I think there's a lot of negativity around people who pay to play games.
Yeah.
Well, but see, to this.
Well,
point,
yes, Gary, but okay, but
well, let me tackle this really quick because he's got a very valid point. Because as a paid professional GM, I'm a bit more of an entertainer.
Yes.
right? And I'm also a customer service rep. I'm an administrator. I'm a, because where I have fun playing the game, though, makes me perfect to be a paid GM. My fun factor when playing is watching the light bulbs go on over their heads and the creative writing I get to do. I'm indifferent to rolling dice. It has no effect on me.
I'm going to go out on a limb.
Dice or whatever, but that's unique condition to me as a person as to how I interpret fun within the game.
Yeah, so I'm going to go out on a limb and say,
different.
Right, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say, you're the exception. Okay, you are an exceptional DM. But if the DM is not invested in having fun also, then it becomes work. Then it truly becomes work. And then everybody suffers.
The interpretation of fun is unique to every individual.
Absolutely, sure.
I think players are a little bit more homogenized in the sense that to be a player, you're automatically assuming you're trying to have fun because you're a player and you're a character. And you have a lot more variety and spice and interest in how your character is being played at the table.
Well, not only that, but you are discovering the story as a player. As a GM, you know the story. There's no surprises other than the player's reactions. But I guess what I'm saying is, if it ceases to be fun for me as a paid DM, then my game, the player's game, is going to suffer because I'm not going to be invested in it as much.
Well, we're going to table this in a moment because I want to make this a show in the future.
Okay.
That is why I'm good at what I do.
And I would argue that's a very good point, Kurt. I would argue that is the reason for a paid DM.
Correct.
Okay.
However, Ugrun brings up a valuable point. But when you're GM for fun and not a paid table, do you have a different interaction with the game? I'm actually, if you watch me play Monday and Tuesday nights with my live studio group, with the exception of Monday nights because we're playing Candela, I'm not having that much fun on my Tuesday game right now.
Mm-hmm.
Because the quality of my players just really aren't that good. They're not vibing. They're not showing a lot of interest.
And I've been there too. I am there actually.
And for me, I would rather turn my Tuesday table into a pay-to-play table because 99% of my pay-to-play interactions are always fun and positive.
Yeah.
Because the quality, the scale and quality of the potential player goes up.
That's fair.
It just does.
Okay, let's stop talking about this because this does deserve its own show.
So what we were talking about before, the D20 system,
the narrative, the ability for narrative.
So you had the two polar ends of a spectrum. The D20 kind of pass-fail, simplified system for D&D.
Yep.
And then you have Candela Obscura, this heavy narrative system using D6 dice.
Right.
To your point with Daggerheart, what I love about Daggerheart, to the point that what I love about Daggerheart, to your earlier point about a D12 mechanic of the Daggerheart system being in the middle, I get to roll a little bit of dice in that game. Not a lot, but I get to roll dice again. But I love the way that it took the more fun aspects of D&D, the unique aspects of the Candela narrative, and they've kind of blended it in such a way that you're actually getting kind of what 4th edition failed to do, which was to interpret things in little small components and pull out the components that make sense to use, smush them together and create something different. And I think that's what Daggerheart has done or is in the process of doing with this build that they've done.
Yeah.
I'm eager to get my hands on it because I really want to play that game.
I do too. I'm really excited for this game.
Yeah. And people in the influence space that space pisses me off because hardly any of those people play the game.
Yeah.
They don't. I don't care what anybody says. If the quality of your video is that good, you're spending 40 hours editing that stupid fucking video. You're not playing anything. You're not playing the game. So you go fuck yourself. I know you're not playing it. All these Dr. DMs and, hyper influencers. And I mean, I have a lot of respect for Ginny D because she doesn't flood the market with shit, right?
Yeah.
She does the occasional video, and then she loves to do the cosplay in her TikTok space and have a lot of fun with it, right? I know she's playing because she bitches about it all the time.
She's actually in England right now playing in the castle.
No, she's back. She's already
she's
back from that. Oh, yeah.
Okay.
She's been back for a while.
Oh, okay.
But the reason why I like watching Ginny D is because I like watching how that generation is absorbing her interpretation of the game. And I trust that she plays.
Yeah.
But when I watch all these other ham hocks, talk about this, or they build these fucking beautiful videos that I know take forever to do edits. I'm like, you're not playing, 11 games a week.
Yeah.
I know you're not.
Yeah.
And it's like, when you talk about mechanics, systems, and action economy, they leave that out of their videos because all they're doing is selling fruit salad. They're not selling the recipe. And that's when I get frustrated, because it's like, why don't you try trusting your audience and talk about the D6s, the D12s, the D10s, the D100s? Why don't you talk about narrative? Why don't you talk about all these other themes and exposés of ways to kind of create more creativity at the table? Who gives a fuck about WotC and Paizo? Sure, they've built some cool content you can use, but make it your own, man. Just make it your own, and just do it in such a way that you can incorporate a large variety of dice systems out there that pre-exist for the purpose of you turning a stale game into a fun game. And I don't get it. I don't get it.
I agree.
I don't understand why there's so much shade underneath the clouds. Is the sun up there? Where's the sun?
No, I totally agreed with you. I agree with you. That's why I'm, like I said, I don't get as excited about a lot of stuff as you do. Right. When it comes to like new systems and stuff. I got to admit, I'm really freaking excited for Daggerheart. I think it is the perfect combination. What's that? I think
it checks off one of those boxes that you find very influential on you. Is if you look at what they've built so far, there's some pretty solid production work in the quality of the cards, the artwork.
I'm not even going there. I'm strictly talking about the system. Yeah. Yes, you are correct.
But I think that's part of your passion, is that fun artwork, the quality of the accessories that they put into it and stuff like that.
Yeah, but I'm honestly, that is not factoring into my excitement. It is strictly this mechanic system, because I really feel like this is the perfect balance between crunchy and there's that random factor, and you get to have abilities and scores and shit on your character sheet, but it leaves the door wide open for
that is exactly why Critical Role became so popular.
Yeah.
They showed the world that no matter what they give you to play with, just make it your own, and you'll have fun.
Yeah. I will.
Holy shit, we blew through that hour.
I know. I told you I was excited to discuss this, because again,
I know there's not a lot of people sharing this with us right now, but it's fine. They'll watch it later.
Maybe in VOD. Gary and Kurt, I'll send you both. Well, Gary, I'll give it to you next time I see you when you're in town. But Kurt, I'll send. I do. Thank you for giving me your address. Finally, I'm going to send you some shit.
Some stickers.
I will say though, one last thing. So. This is a great conversation. It kind of became a review of Daggerheart in a way, but I think that just speaks to
the conversation of D20, D10, D6 kind of spurs that kind of, okay, you have all these dice systems or dice mechanics. What is their relationship with systems? And and then what is their relationship with different systems? And how do those two relationships create passion? And I think that's why we ended up talking about Daggerheart, because
I really
the D12s have it's cool. It's fun.
Really think that they took a view of what is out there, and they pulled little bits of the best from different things. The final thing I'll say is, I think it is, I don't know if it was arbitrary or if it was the sweet spot for random factor. I love the fact that they chose D12s because other than people who play barbarians, nobody gives a fuck about D12s. So I'm going to start a dice company, and I'm only going to make D12s because the D12 industry is going to explode.
Well, what I think what's interesting is if you write it out, right? If you write it out, once again, I love analytics. I am a diehard analytic.
So basically, you've got between you've got a D4 all the way up to percentile. D12 might be that sweet spot.
It could be, because if you break it down, it's really a modified version of D6s.
Yeah.
Right? It's all you've done is you've expanded the probability factor by
which allows you to stretch out the outcomes just enough.
Correct. So like if you like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, that's 6 probabilities. 1, 3, 5, 7, 9, 11 is 6 probabilities.
Well, a lot of people do that, Gary, because a lot of the resin dice makers now, they have extra room in the mold, so they make a little fucking token.
And really the D1 and D2,
also called a quarter.
It's called it's basically you're just flipping a quarter to determine, the probability of pass or fail. So I mean, it's kind of a weird thing that kind of like it's kind of
there's your simplest mechanic,
right?
Yeah, there's your simplest mechanic game right there. What do you want to do? I want to do so and so, or I flip a coin.
The door's locked. The dragon eats you. The dragon poops you out. They resurrect the poop.
So continue your the D12 rationale. You got 2, 4, 6, 8.
So really, if you look at their choice for a D12, they looked at the probability factor of the D6s and said, if we're going to be super narrative with a fantasy game that has a lot more probability in it, as opposed to what they've done with Daggerheart, I think they needed a lot more of a probability scale.
Candela. You mean Candela.
Sorry, with Candela.
Yeah.
I think with Daggerheart, they're like, okay, we need a higher level of probability control. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what gravitated them towards the D12, because it allows them to kind of still use the idea of the D6, mechanic, but the probability scales up to the D12.
Definitely,
the marketing would definitely be unique.
I do think there is part of the D12 is so unloved, and to be honest, I actually think the D12. I forget what the geometric shape is called.
It's hexagon, isn't it?
Well, no, each face is a pentagon, but the 3D. Gary, what's the 3D? What's a D12 called? It's not a dodecahedron. It's
not a polygon, is it?
No. Polygon is just
it's based on the numerical value, right?
Yeah. Partially.
So a D12. So a polyhedral is 5.
No.
Poly is what?
Polyhedral is just many sides.
Many sides. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I forget. I know there's a name.
Harry, what is the 3D figure of a D12? Come on. Anyway, I think the D12 is very unloved, and I love it as a physical, holding it and whatever. Now I'm just getting dice crazy here.
It's called a triangular Gibro-Tencop. No, it's called a dodecahedron or
Oh, it is a dodecahedron. Okay.
Yeah, it is.
I was
right.
Yeah. Okay, I was right. Anyway, yeah, but I think I think you just explained maybe why I could not iterate why I don't like the D6s in dice pools, because I just don't think the range of probability is high enough to allow for many narrative outcomes.
I think a game that defines a very, very rigid interpretation of dice pools, there's 2 games out there I think that do it pretty well. There's Warhammer, where you have very dedicated D6 dice pools.
Oh, I wanted to mention Warhammer. Yeah, go ahead.
Right. So like and the difference between 2 available stats determines your pass and failure. right?
Mhm.
So if my strength is so much and your toughness is so little, and I have 12 figures with 6 attacks, I'm rolling 72 dice. That's probably the largest scale dice pool game in the industry.
Yeah.
It's probably the largest scale, right? I would say on the smaller end of that spectrum is Axis and Allies, the old Milton Bradley game. Because if I had tanks, infantry, and artillery, you had your white dice, and then I had my red dice. You had a defense architecture, and I had an attack architecture. And the differences between our dice rolls determined the
what
outcome.
was the max on that? 5 dice?
I
think
there's a max to
5
it.
White, 4 red.
Something like that. So you even have a limited algorithm in it, in the sense that I could have 20 figures and you can have 20 figures. It doesn't change the scale of the max probability.
Right.
Because you have 5 white and 4 red. There's defenders will always have 1 more dice depending on the probability factors. So as long as we don't get down to 5-on-4 in the figures for Axis and Allies, the probability factor remains 5-on-4, and it truly represents a meat grinder, right? It becomes a numerical probability on top of the rolling probability of the mechanic of the dice.
Right.
But the system is always weighted better towards the defender. Therefore, typically a defender has 12 minis and the attacker might have 30.
Yeah.
Right. So it
should be.
It creates that environment of a rigid probability system. There's no room for narrative in either Warhammer or Axis and Allies. There's no reason for it because it's a complete probability system.
Well, and Warhammer, just takes it to its extreme. I mean, it takes you 15 minutes to finish.
You put that big giant War Titan out on your table, and it has like 37 attacks just by itself.
Yeah.
But
not only that, but you gotta roll for accuracy, then to see if you penetrate armor, and then to see if you.
I was watching a video one time, and this guy goes, "Oh, your Titan has like a super duper plasma melta or whatever they call it, right?" And he goes, "You better go get the template for that." So he goes up and leaning up against the wall is a hula hoop. And he brings the hula hoop over and drops it down on like 150 figures, and everybody watched him with the template. They're all. Okay, everybody start rolling your saves.
That's hilarious. That pretty much sums up that game.
It does sum up that game. It really does, But now that we've had this discussion, I've been absorbing all this. When I start writing my Sherlock Holmes role-playing game, it's going to affect my interpretation now. It's like sticking with the rule of 3. Using D6s and D12s may make more sense. Focusing more on action economy and scaling more to the narrative and minimize the mechanical features so that the narrative and the action economy utilize the mechanical features to kind of enhance the fun of the gameplay. So as I go back to now rewrite, because I wrote like 100 pages of my Sherlock game, and I'm like, okay, I got to go back and change all that, because everything I've learned this year with Candela and the conversation around D20 systems, D6 systems, and people talking about the advantages of the D100 system, I'm like, okay, I now have, I think, the tools in my toolbox to maybe I could write a Sherlock Holmes game. That's something I've been wanting to write for a very long time, and hopefully I can pull it off, because it's public domain, people. You can actually go out in the public and say Sherlock Holmes ate shit, and it's not defamation because it's public domain. So,
well, and now you've got something to model it on, which is Daggerheart. But
I'm actually going to model it more on Candela.
Yeah.
And
that's more your thing. Yeah.
It's more
and you know what? That might be one of a very small handful of themes where I agree with you that super narrative may actually benefit a game like that.
Yeah. It would.
A detective game based on detail and intuition and stuff like that. Absolutely.
I could take the Illuminati world system and probably apply just about any kind of steampunk, pre-sci-fi, pre-modernistic world
Yeah.
you know, and have a lot of fun with it. I think you could even do a pretty decent job fantasy wise and come up with, you know, I know no rank cam. Sorry, everybody.
I know.
Time.
This might be one of the few times where we actually pretty much agree on everything. But yeah, you know, to wrap up, I'm really pumped for Daggerheart. I think
me
this.
too.
So from what I've read so far, this could be the sweet spot. You know,
it could be, and I
think. Really
I think when it comes out, I'm going to talk to my Monday table, and we're going to play Candela Obscura during the summer, and you know, during the fall and spring, we'll play Daggerheart.
Mm-hmm.
My Tuesday night table, we'll play D&D.
Awesome.
I think it's a way to remind people that try different games as you play other games. I mean, I think it's important to do that.
Well, I am confident that that you'll be able to play test Daggerheart.
Yeah, I'm fingers crossed.
Little hint there, but
oh, okay.
No. I'm just saying. We may I may have set Jason up to be able to play test Daggerheart when they do when the time comes for them to do a local play test. And you know what? If that's the case, I might actually fly out to California
to the studio
and do that.
Come see my studio, and we can go.
Well, yeah, LA I mean, to see you, but also, then we can take a trip to LA and
that'd be fun. You know what? It's funny you say that, Kirk, because like I've always been thinking about taking the paranoia lore and turning it into something a little bit different and create a conspiracy game. I've thought about doing that, except conspiracies sound exhausting, so I don't know. I don't know if I want to do that.
All right.
I
want to create a game called Chaos, Anarchy, and Paranoia, and the mechanics are literally you have
all the same thing. Just
you have a huge bucket of all different dice, and you just reach in a handful and just throw them on the table, and there's your outcome.
I think they have a video game for that. The little colorful guys in the fire suits that go around, crossing. I forgot what's the name of that game. I can't think of it right now, but it's exactly what you just described.
Is it?
All right, Brian, we did it again. Where can we find you?
Yeah, you can find me at RPG and Co on Instagram. Shoot me a DM. Like Kurt did. Finally sent me his address. I'm gonna send him some stuff. Thank you guys both. Oh no, where are we? Yes. Visit the site also, playrpgandco.com. There's all kinds. Oh my God, excuse me. All kinds of cool content up there. A lot of it is Jason's, some of it is mine, a little bit from Brian, the bearded nerd.
Among Us. Thank you.
What?
Among Us.
Among Us. Oh yeah, Among Us. Yeah.
Exactly that.
Yeah. My son plays that. So yeah, you can find me there. Jace, where can we find you?
The easiest place to find me, head over to Twitch. Look up TTRPG Academy. Go to the Abouts. You'll find all my links and socials and everything to come find me. Otherwise, you could click on our Discord link there. Come join a pretty fun, exciting Discord that's, trying really hard to get to 400 people, but I just can't quite seem to cross that threshold. But, we're getting there.
Come on, people.
Come on.
Buy my product.
TPK?
Tell a story.
Play a game.
And be kind. Thank you all for joining us.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
Bye.